Remember the days when online gaming wasn't always just about competition? When communities of players came together to create something truly special? Halo custom games defined a generation, and today we're going to take a trip down memory lane and explore why these unique experiences hold a special place in our hearts. For some of you, when you hear this, you are instantly transported back to a very different time in gaming. But even by the release of Halo 3, custom games weren't a new concept to the Halo franchise. Back in the earliest days of Halo Combat Evolved and even Halo 2, players were already experimenting with game variants and hosting their own matches. But it wasn't until Halo 3 and Reach that custom games truly flourished, thanks to the addition of Forge Mode, the map editor from Halo. Forge was easily a game changer. It allowed players to build their own maps, placing objects, weapons, and vehicles wherever their imagination took them, and suddenly the possibilities became endless, and the creativity of the Halo community knew no bounds. Custom games quickly became mini-games within themselves, and they weren't about just ranking up and proving your skills in a competitive environment. They were about pure, unadulterated fun. The atmosphere was electric, and friends gathered around their screens, ready to embark on whatever wild adventures custom games would hold for them. And this was, of course, back in the early days of Xbox Live, so whether you were hot micing in game chat or in one of those old school Xbox parties with the right group, you were in for one hell of a night. So today in this hybrid video essay list type video, we're looking back at the greatest custom games of all time. But first, maybe we should go back and look at Halo Combat Evolved, as before the glory days of custom games really came into play, CE definitely set up the groundwork. Halo Combat Evolved didn't even have online play originally when it first released. It was completely reliant on people playing split screen or system link to get to experience the multiplayer side of things, but there still was some customizable options in the game settings that led to a lot of people having fun trying different game modes out, like Phantoms, where everyone was invisible, or just setting some weird settings on Blood Gulch. However, Halo Custom Edition, which would release on the PC, did completely change things up altogether when it came to what type of unique experiences could be had over there. And since Halo 2 Vista never really lived up to the expectations and the limitlessness that Combat Evolved Custom Edition had on the PC, Custom Edition ended up remaining popular for Halo PC players for a really long time, which meant there was some really unique things over there. It's interesting to look back at the types of games that existed in the custom edition days and the types of mods that were out there, because it was well beyond what Xbox players could ever even fathom. But surely the fact that players were putting their own interesting touches on Halo must have at some point caught the eye of Bungie, because as early as the Halo 2 days, there were plans to have Forge and customizable maps implemented in the game. This feature, though, just wouldn't come until Halo 3. I wish back in the day I had realized the scale and scope of what PC players were capable of in Halo, because I probably would have wanted a computer and got that running one way or another, because of how wild some things were. On the flip side of things, while Halo 2 didn't have as strong of a community when it came to customs on PC, for the first time ever, players were able to connect together through Xbox Live, and that was a really big deal. The early days of Xbox were primitive, sure. We had weird microphone setups, online was a new thing, but it didn't stop players from jumping into custom lobbies and trying to set up something different from what was available in the regular playlist options set up by Bungie. Back in these early days, little game types like Infection weren't built into Halo. This was a Slayer mode where teams were one player on red and everyone else on blue, and as the red player got kills, you would have to change teams if you died, and it was all just based on the honor system. This, of course, paved the way later on where there'd be a dedicated Infection mode by Halo 3's release. There were entire lobbies back in the day dedicated to just trying to break out of multiplayer maps and do different types of super bounces. While I never personally experienced a Halo 2 super bounce lobby, I can imagine it was just this long-running game that probably went on over an hour of players just trying to see what they could do with this glitch and how far they could travel. I've played similar games where I just chill in a multiplayer multiplayer map playing some random game and just messing around with the sandbox, and we spent a ton of time already exploring out of bounds areas in Halo games, so I can fully imagine what this must have been like back in those Halo 2 days. But things would change forever with Halo 3, and before Halo 3 even released, when they did a public beta, there was a glitch you could do back in the beta days that would give you access to the custom game lobby, even though you weren't supposed to get access to that in the first place. And as early as the Halo 3 beta, some players who got this glitch to work were already messing around with the game settings to see what type of games they could make. This is actually something I found that was really interesting when looking for footage for this video specifically, but while there's limited documentation from 15 years ago on YouTube of this Halo 3 beta custom games glitch that was done, there was one surviving video of a game type that was created in the beta version of custom games that where if you set the health to be very low, you could actually just splatter players by moving very quickly into them. So all the way back in the limited beta run of Halo 3, players were already doing a unique game type that would later be patched before Halo 3 released. So this was like the only time you could technically play that custom game, which is kind of unique. But everything changed when Halo 3 released, where custom games really began to take shape as the mix of Forge being introduced for the first time with Halo 3, and the various amounts of customization you could do to your game types really allowed the custom games genre in Halo to explode in popularity and possibility. Tie that to the fact that there was now a file sharing system, meant that popular maps and game modes could easily be played and saved so that one friend could show other friends the cool map that he played when in a random custom game lobby. Now for this list, a lot of these are going to be game types that were introduced in one game but became really popular later on in other games. So for the sake of most of these, we're going to be talking about the most popular iteration, or when the game type really became super popular. Like for instance, let's talk about the game type Fat Kid. This was a staple in Halo 3, and Bungie added Infection as a full-on game mode when Halo 3 rolled out, including Alpha Zombie mode, which allowed players to manipulate the settings for various types of traits in this mode. So for instance, the Alpha Zombie could be made really slow but really strong, while all of the zombies that get infected afterwards are really fast but incredibly weak. The very first Fat Kid maps started to pop up way back in the day when Foundry was added to Halo 3 Forge, and would have survivors running through all sorts of different obstacles while trying to survive against a scary, horrifying, slowly moving zombie. One by one, your allies are picked off and turned into the enemy before you either make it to the end of the course and you get all types of weapons or something like that, or a power-up, or you also fall to the zombies. One of the most popular variants back in the day was a mode called Omega Journey that was a part of the Fat Kid game type. I remember playing this as one of my earliest custom games experiences, but essentially players would have to use various weapons to try to break down barriers that were blocking the pathway and work together to try to quickly unblock the pathway to move ahead before the zombie caught up to them and killed them all. It was really, really intense and incredibly addicting to play, as there was this form of camaraderie and progression that was very challenging. But on the other hand, if you were a zombie, it was a decent enough consolation prize if you died, just getting to run your way at the various survivors and just try to kill them if you could. This laid the groundwork for a massive subgenre in the Infection game type for custom games moving forward. A lot of people remember Halo Reach custom games. Fat Kid returned in that, though not as many obstacles were physics-based like they were back in Halo 3, but Get Out of My House is one big example, and there were a couple other really popular Fat Kid maps in the Halo Reach days, and this would be a game mode that would recurringly come back down the road. But still on Halo 3, another really popular game type was, of course, Jenga Tower. Now, Jenga Tower did a lot, and it's interesting how I feel about Jenga Tower now versus when I first started playing custom games, because my opinion on this custom game has changed quite a bit over time. I think Jenga Tower was a really good introductory custom game. It was simple, it was kind of a fun homage to the actual game Jenga. You're in this goofy, larger-than-life tower, and objects are being thrown at you. This was a perfect example of what the possibilities of custom games in Forge put together trailer could be. And for players who are just jumping in custom games for the first time to see what these little fun games are like, this was a really great game to show that custom games is more than just a regular Slayer with different settings turned on. This is actually almost a party game mode that the community has created through Halo 3. I mean, there's no real winners and losers in Jenga. You just want to stand on the tower as long as you can and maybe push someone off if you're feeling, you know, a little rowdy. Over the years, with the amount of times I've played Jenga and the amount of lobbies I've been in where they set the rounds to 10 rounds, this game does get a little bit old. Once you've done it long enough, you've done it and it's fine. But nowadays, when I go into these custom game lobbies through MCC's custom game browser, I feel like Jenga Tower comes up every other game and it's always set to 10 rounds and it always takes way too long. And the newer Jenga wall seems to be more popular, though I actually liked how Jenga Tower condensed everything into a single tower. Either one is pretty much the same experience, but back in the day I do think it was important in solidifying that idea of party games in Halo, and that led us into other maps because in the earliest days of Halo 3 we did have Standoff, but we didn't have Foundry just yet, so people had to make do with what they could on Standoff, and Monster Truck was born for the first time. Now a lot of you have maybe played the original Monster Truck map that was here on Standoff. However, one of the bigger, more iconic ones that later showed up on Bungie favorites was the lava pit on Sandbox. Oh boy, was this one wild, and I remember having so much fun on this. It's just a simple lava pit in the middle. It has kill walls in there. You don't want to go in the middle, and you're trying to push other vehicles in it. You're trying to splatter people. There's these toxic trip mines that people will then throw and launch people off the map, and they don't even play the game the way that they're supposed to play the game, but hey, that's a part of the experience too. I'm sure many of you have played some form of Monster Trucks over the years, and this is definitely one of the more iconic custom games from back in the Halo 3 days. Then another iconic classic Halo 3 custom game was definitely Duck Hunt. It was a custom game where one player is a sniper and they have to shoot all of the players who are running through this little obstacle course from kind of a set box that they're in. The targets are the ducks, obviously. The players have to try to make it across the open field while avoiding getting sniped and using whatever little cover that they actually have. And if the ducks can make it to the end, then they get a shot at killing the sniper, who's the technically alpha zombie here. Only one life though, so it's a little different than some of the other infection game types that were popular back in the day. This one was definitely a classic. Another one that came a little bit later but still was really good was Halo on Halo, which sounds like a weird name, but I think it's inspired by the last level of Halo 3, which is the Warthog Run. Essentially, players are once again in a similar scenario as Duck Hunt, except they're on a giant floating platform that's this big ring, and they have to drive a vehicle around the ring and not die in the process, while one infected has a sniper rifle and a rocket launcher and tries to pick off all of the drivers before they reach the end. This can lead to some pretty chaotic moments. All of a sudden you'll be just driving along, feeling fine, and then boom, rocket launcher hits you, or you're driving and a sniper shot will either pick you off or pick your passenger off, or will hit your wheel and cause you to lose a little bit of control of your vehicle, and a lot of the times players would overcorrect and just flip straight off after a simple sniper shot. Gosh, I miss this game type. Trash Compactor was another big one where players would cower in fear inside of this little room, and up top there were a ton of objects where the alpha zombie would knock the objects into the pit, and then all of these cannons would launch the objects at the players, and the goal was just to not get crushed and not die. Drive or Die was another really popular game type. It had originally became popular on Sandtrap, but there was a sandbox version of this too. You just have this big open desert map and you have to drive while very, very fast zombies chase you and try to murder you. Then my personal favorite out of all of Halo 3 custom games was definitely Frogger. I know it sounds like a weird game, but this map Pond Jump was really cool. You start off on this platform, you pick a vehicle, you drive up this ramp, and then there's a little launch, and then there's a tank that's shooting at you. You just have to be smarter than the tank and also hope that they just have really bad aim. Ghostbusters was another really big and popular map back in the day, though these games can go really long if one player just decides to only hide and not go for kills. But yeah, one person is the alpha zombie who is the Ghostbuster, and everyone else is invisible and can jump really high, and the goal is to sneak around without getting caught by the Ghostbusters and maybe try to pick off as many kills as you can, but you can only get kills by backsmacking the Ghostbuster, which makes, you know, some tense moments when you're trying to sneak up without getting killed. There was Left 4 Dead, which had a bunch of zombies running around trying to kill you, and you had to hunker down in these houses, and they had these little doors that you could close made out of barrels, and they could hold off the zombies for a little while, but eventually they would break those barriers and come rushing in, and it was terrifying. And then the multiplayer multiplayer map Rat's Nest had a lot of vehicle-based custom games that were really fun back in the day. Cops and Speeders was one that was a little more role-play based. It could lead to some funny moments if you're with the right group of people and people are using voice comms and stuff, and it can lead to interesting scenarios if you get pulled over for something silly while driving a mongoose. Or there are various different types of multiplayer games where zombies drive around and try to splatter players who move really quickly. But after Halo 3's custom games paved the way for the future, Halo Reach would take things to the next level. When Halo Reach came out, it was very clear that they were going to be taking Forge in a brand new direction, making things bigger and more ambitious than ever before. Sure, Halo Reach only had one core Forge map, but Forge World had everything you could ever need. And the game was a proof of concept right there. This map was enough to foster an entire Halo custom games community for the entire run of Halo Reach. It would have been cool to have other settings, kind of like Halo 3, but Forge World definitely was more than enough. Though, with the way that physics worked in Halo Reach, some iconic custom games would not transfer over as well because of the way that some physics things worked in Halo Reach's engine. Like, Frogger in Halo Reach wasn't nearly as good as Frogger in Halo 3 because the bullet drop on the tank, for example. But that didn't stop Halo Reach from having some incredible custom games that existed in Reach. I think a lot of people have fond memories of some of the crazy things that existed in Halo Reach custom games, and rightfully so. Halo Reach was like king when it came to custom games. Does anyone else remember Jump Rope? This one was pretty wild. It was another big hill where the infected this time are driving the vehicles down, and the players are standing on a platform and they cannot walk at all. They are restricted to where they're standing, but they can jump. And the object is to not get splattered off of this platform while more and more vehicles fastly move down the hill and try to crush you. This one was pretty crazy. It was brought back in later Halo games. It was a really popular game type, and one of the few where it's almost more fun being the infected, but being the survivor can be fun too. There was musical chairs, which always got real toxic because there's only these little platforms you can stand on, and always someone comes up and tries to knock you off your platform to take the platform from you, or tries to share a platform, and then that's not happening and people push each other off, and usually both people end up getting eliminated. But yeah, this one was really an example of what you could even do in Forge and custom games, because this one was a little advanced. They had to like do a lot with spawning in teleporters at certain time intervals, and I always thought this one was just an impressive build. Halo Reach Drag Race. Now, there are a ton of racetracks in general with Halo Reach that were cool, but Drag Race by far was my favorite. It was inspired by a Halo 3 version, but essentially all these players line up and they're in teams of 2. It's like Mario Kart Double Dash, and it's Fiesta weapons, and you have to drive through this long drag race section with a few obstacles on the road while shooting your weapons at the other players, and you want to be the last one standing or the first one to finish and hit the end goal line. Since it's random weapons, it gets crazy, and you have to quickly choose in the few seconds before the race starts who's driving and who's shooting based on what weapons spawn in, and from there, if you have like an EMP grenade launcher, you just EMP the other vehicles and keep going. Or maybe you have a rocket launcher and you want to try to knock some people off. Nonetheless, this is probably my top tier favorite, just because of the variety of this, and there's some skill involved here too, but skill in a different way from the standard be good at shooting in Halo. I think everyone probably remembers Sword Tournament from Halo Reach. That was a big game a lot of people played. Essentially, you spawn in on platforms, and then the platform in between will load in, and you have to go and fight the person. If you win the fight, you move on to the next bracket where the next platforms connect, and slowly everyone fights until there's just one person left alive, and that's cool. I always felt like this game was fun conceptually, and then it became less fun when people in game chat would start teaming up, and it would be like a war of like who teamed up with these 3 people versus who teamed up with those 3 people, and then nobody wants to kill each other and betray each other, and it becomes this whole like political thing. Nonetheless, the game itself was still pretty iconic. I think a lot of you guys remember this. And then of course, a custom game that really became popular in Halo Reach and then would retroactively be reintroduced in other Halo games like Halo 3 and forward into Halo 4 and Halo 5, if I'm remembering this correctly, but Castle Wars. Holy crap, this game was so much fun. It's like energy swords, and there's 2 castles, and you have to capture the flag, and that's it. That's the basics of it. But when there's a lot of players and everyone's just throwing themselves in a 1-lane map, it gets pretty awesomely crazy and fun. It's kind of hard to explain and do it justice, but there was just something about not having to overthink things to just go and fight people. It's you spawn in, you know where they are, you know what your objective is, and you just go. And if you coordinate with your team and you push in at the same time, maybe you can actually capture their flag. It was a long game of back and forth usually, but Castle Wars was a game that had staying power. It's a fan favorite. It would be recreated in later Halo games, and I think we all know why. Now, with Halo Reach and all the other games we didn't really have as much time to cover, the bar was set pretty high. I mean, Halo Reach just blew things things out of the water when it came to Forge and custom games. Also, does anyone else remember Speed Halo? Just the overall chaotic nature of that game was absolutely wild as you just fling down this hill and you try to splatter infected or just try not to die. And unfortunately with Halo 4, it seemed like Forge and custom games didn't really get enough attention from 343. And with Halo 4 releasing in 2012, we did see 3 Forge maps built for this mode. None of the maps were in the same scale of what we had with Forge World, but at least there were different environments, and every type of area you could want to build in was mostly covered across the 3 maps. Eventually though, because there was no like blank canvas for players to forge in, Forge Island would release, which gave players a very flat and generic surface to build on if they chose, and in different sizes. And there was kind of a decline in interest from Halo 4 as Halo Reach just kind of was known for having the best custom games, and a lot of the Forge mode options were limited by some of the decisions that were made with Halo 4. For instance, instead of infection mode where you could have alpha zombies and regular survival type modes, and then you could change up the weapons that the infected use, flood mode was the replacement, and flood mode made it where the flood could only use their flood hand sword thing. This meant that some game modes worked, like alpha zombie type scenarios where you're running from a zombie, but a lot of the game modes that were just kind of an elimination type game mode or a 1 versus 15 type game mode either completely fell apart or had to be reworked into a different game type from the regular infection mode, and that was just a really unpopular decision. It made remaking a lot of the classic games a lot harder, and I think that that contributed to less interest in Halo 4 Forge. Now, with that all being said though, there still were some interesting things that were introduced that ended up being really cool for Halo 4 at its time. The things that were made with flood infection were pretty cool, at least. Having the flood hunt down and kill people is pretty creepy for a zombie type trope in multiplayer. I remember there was a really cool re-evolution of the cat and mouse game type, which was originally introduced in Halo Reach, but I do recall the Halo 4 version was pretty popular and it was a little bit different in the setup, which made maneuvering a little bit more fun and it made it a little bit more fair and balanced for everyone. Remember, Halo 4 released in 2012, so of course there was a Hunger Games type game that was made in custom games back in the day, and this one was interesting. It was called The Trials, and obviously it was a battle royale, but it was much smaller scale and focused on, you know, just having a couple of participants as opposed to like the 100-player battle royale nowadays. But hey, it was an elimination mode on a bigger map. There were trees there, which was only available to become a thing even because Halo 4 did introduce some greenery that you could put down. A lot of the Halo 4 racetracks were really cool though, because since some of the game types from Halo Reach weren't there, at the very least the newer things that were added into Forge, like the platforms and some of the new forging tools, made doing things like racetracks a lot easier than before, and that did lead to some pretty cool racetracks that had been created in this game. I also thought that when it comes to Halo and dodgeball, Halo 4 dodgeball always felt really fun, just throwing sticky grenades at people and then trying to also like do this thing with the ball. It was just an interesting approach to the game type. I think Halo 4 had a lot of potential, but unfortunately just a couple of the settings that ended up getting restricted from Halo Reach ended up really affecting that Forge and custom game community back in the day. Also Rochambeau, that was a big thing in Halo 4. It was brought in later Halo games later on MCZ and stuff, but yeah, it's like a corner and you have to like just shoot everybody with whatever gun you have, and it's very chaotic, but it was a lot of fun. People really did enjoy this one. Okay, but then we have to talk about Halo 2 Anniversary, because while it only was the main Halo game for like a year, there was still some really interesting things made in the Forge custom games sector that absolutely were amazing that not that many people got to see. A lot of it got overlooked because a lot of people were burnt out with the Master Chief Collection when it first initially released. Halo 2 Anniversary removed the basic type of Forge canvas level and just gave players 3 completely blank skyboxes to just go all in and build on, and these were actually kind of ideal. I mean, sure, Forge World was awesome because you could just explore that map as it was, but if you're trying to build something, this was definitely a great tool just to get right into building. There were some really good gems in there. Sure, there were games like basketball or whatever, but Ultimate Frisbee was a thing introduced, and this was by far the coolest later Forge custom game creation I've ever played. I think if I'm talking about like my favorite from each game, this one would count for like my favorite Forge custom game from Halo 4 forward to this current date. It's Ultimate Frisbee. I know, it sounds weird, and when you load it in, at first everyone's confused, but once players get it and it clicks for them like the objective, it is so much fun to strategize, smack talk the other team, and it's one of the few custom games where there's like a massive incentive to actually work together and communicate. Not just doing callouts, but like you have to communicate like when you're open and where you're open. Essentially, you spawn in, you have a ball, and you can pass the ball and throw the ball, and you want to pass the ball to your teammate because you can't walk when you're holding the ball. So your teammates have to essentially go get open, and you have to pass the ball to them and move the ball downfield until a player can catch the ball in the end zone. The catch is, since everyone else can move around, the other team also wants the ball, and they will try to run up and intercept the ball. It's so satisfying not only to catch an amazing throw from a long distance or to make a really good interception, but also just landing a pass or just knowing that some sort of silly movement you did that gave your team the leg up just makes it really satisfying, especially when both teams are trying really hard. Also, if we're talking about Halo 2 Anniversary, we do know that the sumo game type was pretty popular for Halo 2A at least. This game did get a little bit of attention. Everyone's in these gold warthogs and they're on this platform and they have to try to push each other off the platform, a lot like Monster Truck. Except with Halo 4, the ability to despawn objects became a new thing, something that wasn't in the older Halo games. So in Halo 2A, they were able to create this game type where the platforms are just despawning underneath the warthogs until there's just one vehicle left standing on a very small platform. And it was just the new evolution of what Monster Truck originally was back in the earlier days. Then we get to Halo 5, and Halo 5's interesting because Forge was delayed a month and then custom games and the custom game browser came later, and it was coming off the heels of Halo 4's custom and Forge mode. I feel like custom games never got the limelight that it truly deserved. Halo 5 Guardians would introduce just blank canvases, something that would be also used in Halo Infinite, and these canvases were simple, but they got the job done as giving players a base place to start building. And Halo 5 Guardians marked the beginning of a new period where you could really customize your maps to look exactly how you wanted. This was close to a game developer level of tools, and that was something really impressive for just the Xbox One, and it's cool to see in Halo Infinite the same concept would evolve. I think the interest in custom games by Halo 4 was significantly lower than back in the day. However, the scale and level of what players were able to do with Forge and custom games in Halo 5 was substantially bigger and better than any other custom games we had seen before. One thing that did jump up in prominence and more popularity that originated back in the day but continued through here was the existence of secret bases. Like, there were so many UNSC style bases in Halo 5 Guardians custom game browser, and there was also a lot of things called socials, which essentially are just like simple lobbies where you just go and hang out, I guess. It wasn't really for me, but some of the settings that were made and created in this social category were at least cool set locations that were made by forgers. There was also assassination lobbies, something that originated in Halo Reach, where you just go in with the sole purpose of trying to assassinate people. You can't actually kill them, you can only kill them by doing an assassination. Oh boy, also with the whole secret base thing, there were a lot of roleplay servers out there, and that was a big deal about Halo 5. I know Luke and I once joined one, and it was a clan, and there was like a whole clan recruitment process you had to go through, and it was just wild, and I don't know. I don't know why it was like that, but it was Halo 5 clans were something else. There was also survival maps in Halo 5 that were really popular. Essentially, you had to like run through some sort of obstacle course and things would try to kill you, and you didn't want to die, so you had to try to stay alive and learn the course. This like clown one became really popular back in the day. One of my old Halo friends from all the way back in the Halo 3 days, Spartan Blood 1, has been really big on creating maps and game types across the Halo games. He and his friend Bob is here created some amazing things in Halo 5 back in the day. They created a Duck Hunt game and a Space Invaders game that actually looks like real Duck Hunt and Space Invaders, but they're not just like aesthetic map recreations, they're actual games that you get to play. Like, you get to shoot at the other players, and this whole thing was just incredible. They even were featured on like a couple of Rooster Teeth videos over the years, and I've always been impressed with what they've been able to make in Forge and custom games together. I always was like, hey, I know that guy. There was also some really cool race voice tracks created in Halo 5, now with the ability to change like the color of things and have a lot more flexibility and customization in Halo 5 Forge, things like Rainbow Road were created. And these are always just really cool, the way that people utilize colors to really bring things to life in a different way, and at least Halo 5 has that under its belt. Now when it comes to Halo Infinite, I'll be honest, I haven't actually really gone too deep into the custom games modes. There are some custom games and they do seem kind of fun, but I haven't seen any that were not just a full-on recreation of something that had existed previously, with a few exceptions. There was this game where I was driving a miniature mongoose and my Spartan was giant and I was driving for my life or something. That was pretty interesting. I really like the Super Smash Bros type knockoff thing that people were doing for a while, where they recreated like a Final Destination from Smash Bros and then used grappling hooks and just beat the living daylights out of other players. I think that this is an A+ idea for sure. We'll be really interested to see what the future holds when it comes to Halo Infinite, as more creators keep getting on, joining Forge Up and creating brand new custom games for players to experience. Halo custom games were more than just a collection of digital experiences. They were a testament of the power of community, imagination, and the unyielding spirit of fun. They brought people together, inspired creativity, and left us with memories that will forever define our gaming generation. Huge shout out to the Halo community who's uploaded their custom games over the years so that we could actually show examples of a lot of these games, and an extra shout out to iSpiteful for his ongoing track record of always covering the best custom games. If you're interested in Halo custom games, make sure you are subscribed to him. But for now, we wanted to turn it around to you guys. What did you guys think of our list of the top custom games and Forge games of all time? Were we somewhat close to your list? Did we miss any that were iconic? Did we catch any that you totally forgot about until you watch this video? Let us know in the comments down below. I do read our comments, surprisingly, if you guys didn't believe me. So I will know if you guys have said like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that until you mentioned it. That'll make me feel cool. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Use code RocketSloth when checking out for gamer subs if you got a refill. It helps us out. Also, you know, you can always subscribe to RocketSloth for more videos like this. And otherwise, we'll see you guys all next time with a brand new video.